Hi, this is Ed Downs at Aberco, manufacturer of Piemaster machines. This is the fifth tutorial in a series explaining the operation, maintenance, and safety of the Piemaster SA21. This video will cover the roll system, the part of the machine that actually forms the pie. Previous tutorials we covered the air system, the pneumatics, the electronics, the knife, the water spray system, and the transmission and the fill system. So we're down to the last couple of systems here, the roll, the turnover system, and the conveyor. So we'll get right into those. In the previous tutorials, we started talking about safety and the knife. So I'll bring it up again. The knife, as I've said, you treat it like a running chainsaw. Cannot emphasize enough to always be aware of that knife, its position, what's going on with the machine, and when the hopper is not installed, that the knife guard is over the knife. One thing I forgot in the last tutorial talking about the fill system is this piece right here. This is a splash guard that fits over the orifice there. It's got two spade type thumb screws to hold it in place. When the knife closes, it slams shut pretty fast, so depending on your filling, with fruit filling, it tends to maybe throw some of the filling towards the operator as it cuts it off. Splash, so we have a splash guard. I would say half of our customers use it and the other half don't. Some fillings will stick to the inside and build up, and then you have to stop every so often and clean it out, and that becomes kind of a nuisance. So I've seen a lot of things around that. Usually they'll put some saran wrap around the end casting here. There's some plastic wrap, just so they don't have cleanups, not as much. But that's the purpose of that. It's a splash guard. It's made of Delrin, which is a semi-crystalline thermoplastic polymer. Plastic. It is USDA approved for meat contact and everything. So that's what its purpose is. You can use it or not, depending on if it works and helps. So then also down here, just a little reminder, there's a couple of knives that came off of machines that the hopper was not installed properly and it got schwacked by the hopper, and that's a few $100s worth of replacement there. So anyways, we're talking about the turnover section now. You have your molds here mounted on top of the drive shaft and the driven shaft. They roll towards each other, making a pie. Sorry about it, it's a little difficult to do by hand. As they roll together, this swing arm comes out, and you can see that screw in there. There's a slight gap in there. It's supposed to be between 40 and 60 thousandths of an inch, and we have a little feeler gauge. There's a procedure in your owner's manual that how to do this. You roll the molds together like this, perpendicular to each other, 90 degrees, and then you set that gap in there with a little feeler gauge. There's a little screw there that holds it in place. The purpose of that is so when the molds come together, that they are getting the full pressure of this spring pulling them together, so you get a tight seal. And also the swing arm, as we talked about in the electrical components, it comes out and contacts this switch. If that swing arm gets pushed over far enough, it opens that switch. That's a safety switch that is tied to the lockout, and it'll shut the machine down. If that mold swings out far enough to make that switch, that means there's something in between these molds that isn't supposed to be there. And hopefully it's not a hand. That's the idea of the two push button switches that the operator has to push simultaneously, so that doesn't happen. The molds are held on to these shafts with these straps. If you notice these flat spots here, these are adjustable, so you can slide the molds back and forth on the shafts to position them. With some fillings, when the knife closes, it will tend to throw the filling a little bit out towards the operator. So if your filling is that case, you can slide the molds down towards the operator a little bit so the filling will land in the middle of the molds where you want it. So as the molds roll, This cancel cam, we call it, is on the end of this shaft right here. It comes around and eventually it contacts this cancel switch. When it opens this cancel switch, that sends a signal to close the roll valve that turns the roll motor, that turns these molds. So it closes the air off, so the roll stops. So that switch, when that cam hits that switch, that dictates where your molds stop in the cycle. So they come around and they stop after that cam opens that switch. So it'll coast a little bit. It opens that switch and then they kind of coast to a stop. So where you want these molds to start and stop, and there is some variance in that. You can make a little smaller pie by starting there. You can make a little bigger pie by starting there. So you set that by just taking this an Allen wrench, and there's this socket head right there, and you loosen it, and you can move this clockwise or counterclockwise. So wherever you set it will dictate where it hits this switch, and when it hits that switch, controls where the molds stop at. Pretty simple adjustment. If you're using different size molds, switching between sizes, you'll probably have to change that with each mold set. Sometimes you might even have to readjust this gap. Isn't a big deal once you do it enough. It'll take you 5 minutes maybe. It really isn't a big deal, but it's just something you have to do. If you're changing molds, you might not have to, just depending on the different molds you're using. On the other side in here where the roll motor is at, there's your roll motor. We talked earlier, there's another safety switch over there. There's also a swing arm in there, and it's at the end of that spring. It's difficult to see, but you also have to adjust the gap on that as well. It's not as hard as it looks. You can reach your hand. You can reach your hand in there and get a feeler gauge in there. It's not a big deal, and that needs to be adjusted as well. Also, all of these gears, there's the drive gear for the motor there, and then behind it, I wish I could get this camera in here more. See if I can maybe see it from over here. Pardon my camera work. Yeah, you can see these aluminum gears. Aluminum gear there, they're on the shafts that the molds are on. And the drive gear off the roll motor turns those aluminum gears, which in turn rolls the molds. All those need to be lubricated with food grade anti-seize, and we will provide you with a jar of that with in your spare parts kit. There's a couple of different versions of it. I actually recently came across a different version I like better. It's a little more pasty. It sticks. It's not as runny, so it doesn't splatter around as much. It's good stuff. You put it on there and it stays on there for a long time. It doesn't go away. It's a very good lubricant. So anyway, so coming off the roll motor, the roll motor. Sorry about that. The roll motor turns that gear, which in turn turns the aluminum gears, which rolls the molds. But it also has this belt. Has these little cog pulleys right here, and this belt comes down to this shaft and this pulley, and that shaft simply goes through to this pin drive. And the pin drive, there's two pieces. This piece has little pins on it that we'll see when we take the conveyor off later. And it just splines into this side, and this side has a shaft that goes through to this knurled tube that advances the conveyor. So every time the molds roll, you can see the conveyor you can see the conveyor turns with it. As the molds roll, the conveyor turns. So with every pie made, the conveyor advances and the pie is dropped onto the conveyor, and then when the next pie is made, it advances and it drops down. So it's just a mechanical linkage between the roll motor and the conveyor to drive it. The conveyor, as you just saw, is splined in that way, and it's held in place by two L brackets, one there and one here, and there's just a little spade type thumb screw you take out and you remove the whole conveyor from the machine, which we'll show that later. And then at this end is the adjustment, tension adjust. Pretty straightforward. There's a screw going in there to the shaft that goes across this pulley, and you screw it in or out to move it in and out. And then there's they flip up. They hinge on that bolt, so you can take the conveyor belt off. So you can get the slack in there to remove the belt, and then it just drops back down. Just drops back down into place. So there's adjustment on each side. Sorry, this is some of my worst camera work, isn't it? Just on each side, and you want to adjust it so as the belt travels, it stays even between these two sides, so it doesn't rub on the side. USDA inspectors, probably one of their biggest calls is when the edges of these conveyor belts start to fray. It takes a long time. These are very durable belts. It's pretty heavy duty. If you keep it properly adjusted where it's not rubbing too much, I mean, it's always going to rub a little bit and move around, but they will last for a very long time. And that's a custom belt we have made for us, but we always have lots of them in stock. So if every now and then I'll get a phone call that an inspector calls someone on it, and we can run one out to you. At any rate, that is the gist of the turnover section and the conveyor. The videos after this, we'll get into the knife adjustment and setting the gap on the swing arms, removing the conveyor, removing the removing the transmission and the hopper from the machine, and then reinstalling them. And then we'll operate the machine. We'll get into the settings. So there's probably another 3 or 4 videos to go to get through this. Okay, thank you very much.